The old man never expected the roar of a broken motorcycle to change his life. He never imagined that kneeling beside a stranger on an empty road at sunset would set off a chain of events that would shake an entire town, heal old wounds he thought would never mend, and remind thousands of the quiet power of kindness. But fate has a way of finding the people who've stopped believing in miracles. And on that warm evening, as smoke curled from the busted engine of a biker, stranded on the shoulder, fate finally found Frank Dalton, a retired Army veteran who had spent years hiding from the world and the ghosts he carried. If you believe in kindness, second chances, or the goodness still left in this world, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps stories like this reach more people. Frank had lived alone for almost a decade in a small house on the outskirts of town. After losing his wife to cancer and his son to a war that took too much from too many families, he had withdrawn into silence. His days were slow repetitions of tending a small garden, patching up old tools, and pretending the past didn't whisper to him from every corner of the house. But on that evening, as he drove home from picking up spare lumber at a nearby hardware store, he saw a figure hunched beside a polished motorcycle, fists trembling with frustration. The man was younger, broad-shouldered, covered in tattoos, and wearing the unmistakable leather vest of the Hell Angels, a sight that would cause most folks to keep driving. But something in the man's posture wasn't threatening, it was defeated. Frank pulled over without thinking. Old instincts, those of a soldier, a father, a man who once believed that people were worth helping, guided him. He crouched down beside the biker, whose eyes flashed with surprise at first, then softened with exhaustion. The bike's rear axle had seized, the chain was misaligned, and the engine had taken in dust from the roadside. Frank didn't have to speak much. The tools in his hands and the calm precision of his movements said enough. The biker watched him closely, occasionally handing him wrenches or holding the bike steady. As the sun dipped low, their shadows stretched across the pavement. Two strangers working as if they had known each other for years. The biker introduced himself only as Ryder. His voice cracked when he explained that he had been riding alone because he had been kicked out of his chapter after spiraling into a destructive slump. His brother had recently died. He'd been drowning in guilt and anger, and the club had finally lost patience. His bike breaking down felt like the universe delivering another blow. Frank listened quietly, recognizing the weight in the man's voice, because he'd carried the same heaviness for years. Without judgment, he kept working, tightening bolts, adjusting tension, and wiping grime from the pipes. By the time the engine coughed back to life, Ryder's eyes were glassy, reflecting gratitude he couldn't seem to put into words. Frank simply nodded, patted the gas tank, and said the closest thing to encouragement he'd offered anyone in years. Ryder rode off, disappearing into the orange glow of the horizon, and Frank drove home believing that would be the end of it. But life had a different plan. The next morning, just after dawn, Frank stepped onto his porch with a cup of coffee and froze. The earth trembled beneath thousands of idling engines. A long line of motorcycles stretching beyond what the eye could follow filled the road. The fields, the driveway. They surrounded his home like an army of chrome and leather. Nearly 2,000 bikers sat quietly on their motorcycles, their vests flashing the unmistakable insignia of the Hell Angels. Not one helmet was on. Not one engine was revved. It was a silent salute. Ryder walked up the path toward Frank, but he wasn't the broken man of yesterday. He stood taller, steadier, and behind him came the chapter president and countless other members who had followed Ryder's desperate call for help. Ryder had told them everything about his meltdown, how he'd been spiraling, how the stranger, this old veteran with steady hands and quiet strength, had helped him without fear or judgment. In a world where men like them were often treated like outlaws, Ryder said, Frank had seen a human being. The president removed his gloves, something rare and symbolic, and told Frank that respect like his deserved recognition. They had come not for intimidation, but for gratitude. They wanted to repay him. They wanted to honor him. And in an unexpected moment that made Frank's throat tighten, Ryder admitted that last night. After fixing his bike, he'd gone back to his chapter not to fight, but to apologize. Frank hadn't fixed just the motorcycle. He'd given a lost man a reason to try again. Frank's eyes burned with emotions he had tried to bury for years. For the first time since losing his family, he didn't feel alone. These men, tattooed, tough, loud, often misunderstood, stood in silence out of respect for an old soldier who never expected anyone to show up for him again. One by one, they approached him, offering patches, handshakes, gifts, and words of thanks. And then Ryder placed something in Frank's hand, a small metal token engraved with the words for the man who reminded us what brotherhood really means. A lump rose in Frank's throat. All those years he had spent believing that kindness no longer mattered, that the world had moved on without him, melted away. In that moment, surrounded by the thunder of loyalty and gratitude, he felt his heart begin to heal. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe so more people can experience stories that remind us what humanity looks like. Before we end, I'd love to know, would you have stopped to help Ryder? Comment below your opinion, it means more than you know. In the end, the town never forgot the day. 2,000 bikers filled the roads to honor an old veteran. And Frank never forgot what it felt like to be seen again, not as a lonely man with a painful past, but as a hero in the quietest, most genuine way. And sometimes that's all a person really needs, one moment of connection to remind them that kindness still has the power to echo across miles, hearts, and lives.